Hello, and welcome to the Judo Way of Life podcast. Today, I am joined by Dr. Derek Muller. Hello, Derek. How's it going?
I'm doing very well, David. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate this opportunity.
No, thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come and talk. Like I said, we were just discussing beforehand how sort of the quick turnaround, how this one came about from a post on somebody else's Instagram and, making the connection. And here we are in, I think, less than a week.
That's right. That was a really great turnaround. I like Instagram because it really connects people around things that they love. And I think that the Judo community is so open to making those kinds of connections across the world. It's been a ton of fun. And so thank you for reaching out through Andy's page, through Dojo Outfitters page, and having a chat with me.
This is a subject I've wanted to discuss on the podcast for a while now, so looking forward to getting into it. Let's start with who you are and how you got into judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and a little bit about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. My schooling and my judo kind of journey go hand in hand together, and my martial arts journey go hand in hand together. I actually started judo late in life. I think a lot later than most people. I started around the age of 25, right at the beginning of graduate school while I was getting my doctorate. And I had kind of was looking for some way to exercise or get some kind of physical activity while I was doing my studies. And I think I had gone to like some Muay Thai class or something like that. And I think the instructor kind of pushed me towards doing grappling or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because I think they kind of just identified I didn't have what it was going to take to like be able to take a lot of punches and stuff like that. I think they were also looking after me for, taking a lot of punches in the head, especially if I was going to be a psychologist and get my doctorate too. I think they were kind of looking out for me a little bit. So I appreciate that. And I went to this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, and the first class I went to, I didn't even know really what it was. And I actually went to a judo class, and they said, well, the instructor there, Pat, was like, oh, you should try Portland Judo, which is where I started judo. And I spent maybe 5 years there while I was studying in graduate school there in Portland, Oregon, under Louis and Andy Hung out there in Portland Judo. So I spent most of my time there learning kind of the fundamentals of judo, all the basic throws, that kind of stuff. And then I had to leave to pursue, my PhD further, go to postgraduate, do my postdoc, things like that. So I traveled around the country and then finally landed here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I picked up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu more and then a lot more judo with my current judo coach, Joe Youngworth, who I'm really having a lot of fun with. We're having a lot of fun with and doing lots of competitions. And I'm really grateful for doing that because, COVID restrictions are starting to lift more. And it's finally nice to get out there on the mat and travel around the country a little bit and do some competitions.
And so now do you sort of split your time between the two disciplines, or do you sort of find yourself gravitating more towards one or the other?
Yeah, I find myself gravitating more towards judo right now. I think that's because I found a really good crew and I've been excelling with a lot of grip fighting and the judo kind of strategy. And I've been competing a lot more in judo and really enjoying that right now. I mean, I love Newaza and I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and where I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a ton of fun. It's a great community at Charlotte Jiu-Jitsu Academy, but like judo has just always been my one love. And I'm really into it right now. And I'm just loving the stuff that I'm picking up. And I've grown so much because I think we're taking a different look at judo, and I'm focusing more on the mental side. And especially as I've gotten older too, I think that's something as you grow older as an athlete, you have to figure out kind of your strategy and utilize a lot more of those mental skills. Whereas, maybe when I was younger and lifting a lot more or had more time for that kind of stuff, I could just kind of brute force through things, although that's not exactly the best strategy. I was probably more a physical fighter, but now I think I'm much more of a cognitive or thoughtful fighter than I was when I was younger. I don't know if that's rings true for you, David, or not, since you've been doing judo for such a long time.
Yeah, very much so. When it was maybe about 10 years ago, when I was sort of getting into the senior side, or like maybe a little bit, mate, 12, 13 years ago. So when I turned 20, and then I was transitioning into the senior program. And yeah, I was just full of piss and vinegar and
Yeah.
sending wild haymakers over the top. And
Yeah.
yeah, there was very little thought process other than go. And then, yeah, over the years, as my go button has isn't as effective anymore. I've had to become a bit more mindful of how I use that strength and when I use it, and being a lot more economical with my attacks, which has proved very effective, to be honest with you. I wish I'd employed that technique a little bit sooner. But yeah.
I absolutely agree with you. I think the judo strategy, I'm learning so much about kumikata and grip fighting. And if I would have known this stuff much earlier, I started late anyways, but would be in a completely different place now.
Yeah, I think that rings true for a lot of people. I wish I knew now when I was younger.
Yeah.
And then, so what interested you in psychology? Because you were already doing your doctorate when you first started getting involved with grappling sports. So what initially drove you towards psychology? I'm assuming you'll have done that as a degree, then as a master, as a clinical psychologist. Is that the pathway in America?
Yeah, that's right. The program I did was a doctorate in clinical psychology all the way through. And then I've focused more on sports kind of initially because I'm so interested in like human performance at its peak. But where I first started, I was interested in human motivation. You always start with your mother, right? As a psychologist, I mean, it's kind of the joke, right? She had this really deep insight into human motivation and could explain things to me very well. I was always fascinated by why people did things. My dad was kind of a tinkerer. He was always tinkering around the garage. And I think I kind of just put both of these pieces together. Like, what is it? How does stuff work? And apply that to the psychology realm. And I'm really always fascinated by this question of why and how we can measure and improve things. And I think that's where kind of mental conditioning comes down to a kind of fundamental resource for us as judo players. Like, how can we condition ourselves, not just in the sort of technical realm or the physical realm, but why is it that we're behaving in a particular way? Is it because we've trained ourselves to do that? Or is it because intentionally, or is that kind of a bad habit that we've always done consistently? And how do we uproot and change some of those things? I mean, mental abilities take time to develop, just like in any other sort of realm, whether that's technical or physical, but also bad mental abilities or bad habits take time to develop. And I feel like, we're just kind of reflecting on our past. And if I would have done this differently 10 years ago, I would be in a different spot. But I feel like the center part, or something that's central to mental conditioning, is that reflection piece. And it's central because you're trying to develop a mental strategy around lots of things that you learned growing up, whether that be kind of personally or in your judo, that you need to kind of fix or remake. And I feel like that's kind of where I am in my life now, really focusing on and analyzing at a much deeper level my own judo, my own life through this kind of personal process. So I think that those kind of martial arts or psychology or judo go much deeper than just like a sport and then who you are. I think, as a martial artist or as a judoka, these things are linked, and it's part of very much deeply embedded into who you are. So I think about these skills and who I am as a psychologist and who I am as a judo player almost kind of similarly or the same. They're very much linked together, trying to understand the why and how I can improve, and then hopefully sharing that with other people as well, just like with the book or having a podcast or, posting on Instagram or, doing a session with your friends in your dojo.
So with judo training, or grappling training in general, I would say this would be true for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. You could go to judo and train, and you would become physically fitter, you become stronger. You would also become mentally stronger just by going through the training, whether that's just technical focus or the randori, and it would have a benefit. And then people will then supplement that with physical, so like strength and conditioning training, going to the gym, going for a run, these kind of things. Now, I suppose the mental training side of things is the lesser known or the lesser maybe discussed area.
That's right.
Why do you think that is?
That's a really good question that I have not been able to reconcile, right? Because there's this question, right, that you can pose to anything, to just about any athlete, like how much of your sport is mental? How much of judo for you is mental? No, I often get, oh, it's 80% mental. Oh, it's 75% mental. It's 90% mental. And if we believe it's our belief that so much of judo training is mental, why don't we actually prepare mentally for a match? Or why don't we prepare or have a strategy or develop good habits when we're doing randori? In fact, there's a study of 200 Canadian athletes right before the 1984 Olympics, and they were kind of assessed for three major readiness factors: the physical side, the technical side, and then the mental side. And of those three readiness factors, mental readiness was significantly associated with how successful they were at the Olympics. So did they bring home a medal or not? So that mental readiness is a huge, huge factor. And we even admit it to ourselves and say, oh, judo is 80% mental or 60% mental, but we don't train that. And your question is a really good one. Why is that? I think it comes down to this piece, like to really spend some time in reflection and see, where am I going to lose this match? It kind of hurts, right? It's kind of like you're almost preparing to lose before you lose. It's that same process. Asking yourself, is it possible for me to lose this match? Does not feel comfortable. It does not feel good. And people really want to avoid that because it creates kind of this internal conflict, or you have to question yourself. And I think that's why people avoid the mental training side, is because there's some fear around even tapping in and thinking about that question. What if I lose? What if I'm not really prepared? And I think that the only way to really answer that question, what if I'm not really prepared, is to say, okay, maybe I won't be, but if I tackle this head on and I train the mental side, we know through research, through scientific inquiry and methodology, that those people are more prepared. If you prepare mentally, your performance does go up, and it aids in performance. So those are my thoughts on that one. I think people try to avoid that uncomfortable thought. I think you'll find that with a lot of mental training programs.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very raw and emotionally linked position, and I think there's probably still a little bit of stigma around, basically admitting that you're working on this. I think there's sort of this whole the whole bravado.
Yeah.
Of no, I'm fine, I'm strong, I'm good. Where actually it's being able to admit that, oh, actually, no, I need to work on this, and that's fine.
Yep.
And that's actually a much stronger pathway.
Absolutely.
And
there's always in a lot of dojos I've been to, and in a lot of BJJ academies or gyms, there's how you'll find someone that never competes, right? But they're absolutely great in randori or sparring or rolling, but they never compete. And it's always like, why doesn't this person compete? And I think I remember this one individual. I think he was, because he was so scared, but he could destroy anyone in the gym, and his technique was excellent. But it's because of that. It's because of that fear of, I don't want to answer that question. What if I'm not ready? Or what if I'm truly not good? And if you begin to touch on that road, it can be a really scary thing. And just like you said, the bravado kind of prevents people from doing that.
That was something I think that when I've reflected on my own judo career, I think not I was more than happy. So my own personal journey, I think it was like 18 or no, 19, 20, around that age. And I went to see a sports psychologist because my performance had dropped off. I developed a bit of an ego when around 18,
Hmm.
as a lot of young men do, as they're sort of trying to figure out who they are. I had a couple
Yeah.
of good wins on the junior circuit, and I was like going to the junior worlds and Europeans. And I just started university, and I got a bit too big for my own boots. And then I lost a few competitions, just got battered, and my ego took a real
Yeah.
hit. And then again, just as it was around the time where I was starting to like, okay, I'm a man now. I'm 18.
Hmm.
I'm strong and independent and all that crap. Um, and then I went to see a sports psychologist, and she was great, but she had zero understanding of judo. Like I pretty much spent most of the time just explaining what judo was to her, and I just thought
Right.
like, oh, this is a bit of a waste of my time. And I was like,
Hmm.
I'm going to go and figure this out for myself.
Yeah.
And that's what I did with a lot of trial and error. But I think I put a lot of pressure on myself in competitions to win, and it took me a long time to get to a place where I had a strong psychology for competition prep and the day of the competition, which is something I want to talk to you about in a minute.
Absolutely.
And it took me a while sort of to get there. Like, and my coach would sort of joke if there was an Olympic medal for training camp performance, then I'd have been closer to that because, like on a training camp, I'd be throwing people like way outside of where I was at in competition level, right? And then come to a
Yeah.
competition, it just all fall apart.
Oh, yeah.
And that was more so because of the pressure I put on myself. I think it was like a bit of more of a fear of losing, which then just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
That's absolutely true.
So obviously identified, maybe why people don't go down this route initially. But if somebody did want to start, there's a lot of this talk about like work and your mental health.
Yeah.
What would that actually look like in practical terms? Because I think sometimes it's just something that's sort of thrown around just as a term, and there's very little actual practical advice attached to it.
That's true. That is very true. You'll see like a lot of people say things like consistency is key and you need to have discipline. And it's like, oh, okay, like I think I have discipline. I think I'm fairly consistent, but what does that really mean for me? And you need to set goals, right? Or you need to use, visualization or something like that. And it's like, okay, but how do I actually do something like that? Where do I even begin? And I think that there's two things that are, I think, exceedingly important that aren't talked about when it comes to mental training. And they're very much consistent with the kind of strength and conditioning training that you might do and that many people I'm sure do is there needs to be a progression of mental skills training, and then it needs to be periodized as well. So I'll talk about each one of those things kind of broadly, and then we can get into kind of these techniques, right? So when I think about like beginning the journey of mental conditioning, and let's say your goal, you really need to kind of question yourself and think about. And I ask in the book, and I ask athletes like, what are your goals before we even get to there? It's like, what kind of pain can I tolerate along this journey? Right? What kind of like injuries and losses are you willing? Do you think that you could reasonably accept for this period? If you want to be, an Olympic champion or a world champion, or if you just want to compete in a few local tournaments, that's great. I love it when our kids compete we have some tournaments coming up locally here, and I think they're getting ready to start, and it's going to be great. But I think as an adult, you kind of have to ask yourself, what kind of pain can I tolerate? What am I willing to give up? David, I'm sure you could kind of resonate with some of these questions. Like, if you give up a lot of time to train to be a real professional athlete, time with family, time with people you care about, all those types of things. And then I think a bigger question that isn't asked is, what am I willing to learn? And really what that means is, what am I willing to relearn? So the focus of your training should be about habit formation from my perspective. And this is one reason, I think it's very important to to train with lots of different people, with lots of different perspectives, go to training camps and be very open-minded about how other approaches to judo, what other approaches there are. I feel like it's a process of really analyzing yourself and analyzing your judo to see if, is this truly the most effective thing I could be doing for a competition, or the most effective thing I could be doing in randori? And is this going to lead to the outcome that I'm hoping? Not just because I like this throw or because I'm tired, so I throw a sumigaeshi in there or something like that, which I've been known to do, and and it's a bad habit, right? So we have to eliminate those things so we create as many winning habits as possible. So there's some things that you have to almost put your ego in check when you ask that question. What am I willing to learn or relearn in order to get an outcome that I truly believe in and that I want? I don't know if any of those questions kind of resonate with you or your thoughts there.
Yeah. So I was having a bit of a sort of smile to myself when you were saying about what am I prepared to lose? And yes, I think back over the amount of, like I say, injuries, time spent in hospital, cancelled holidays with the family, or, relationships breaking down, and it's been 25 years, and, still things are dropping off. And, I'm not even a competitive athlete really now anymore. I'm focusing more on coaching, and I do think about the amount sort of sacrifice for the sport. Well, it's not even for the sport. It's what I've wanted to do.
Right.
And I think that's something I don't think people sometimes fully understand getting into it. I've got a couple of young athletes, and, I sort of talk to them about that side of things. And, I'm not in a sort of, I don't want to be like a fear-mongering kind of way, but just be like, listen, you're going to have to, things are going to have to change if you're going to want to have to achieve the goal that you want. So I sort of joke now when I look back about my career, I know how much I needed to sacrifice and how much I needed to train to actually get nowhere near my goal, which was to go to the Olympics, right?
Right.
So I trained my ass off and I sacrificed a lot. And technically, I didn't get anywhere near where I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I did, obviously achieve a lot trying to get there, which I wouldn't have achieved otherwise, I don't think. But yeah, that part really resonates with me when you mentioned that then.
Judo is so unforgiving of a sport. And I can't think of another sport that's so unforgiving. You can walk out on the mat and feel so confident. And then within, that first sequence, that first 25 seconds, I don't know how many times I've walked out bowed and then just been flat on my back and being held down. And it's like, what even happened to get here in this moment? it's like that. And it's just, it's a terrible feeling, but I also wouldn't trade it for anything else. When you walk into that auditorium, or you walk into that gym, and it's the sound on the mat and the sound of people walking around, this cheering and the screaming and the people's feet on the tatami. Like I can't think of a better way to spend my time on a Saturday or a Sunday. It's just an incredible feeling. So it's a really trying to balance those two things that, judo can be so difficult and unforgiving, and then it can bring so much joy. And you're a coach now, so even developing other people, I'm sure, brings you a ton of great feelings, a lot of excitement to see that too. Yeah,
definitely. Well, that's my goal now is shifted to trying to help others achieve more than I achieved.
Right. Absolutely. So I think to getting back to your question about progression, it's, mental skills to really be effective. It's got to follow a proper progression, and acquiring a strong kind of mental game is an iterative process of learning, right? And then practicing. So learning and understanding and acquiring the basic skills of, let's say, visualization, or even goal setting, or relaxation, exercise, or mindfulness, which I know you're very interested in. And then being able to practice those outside of the dojo so that they're strong enough to be effectively employed during training, right? And then they need to be incorporate it into the next level, into competition. So you integrate that into competition. So you're using skills during competition, like relaxation, focusing on what's most important, even kind of when you dealing with stress or the emotions or negative self-talk in competition. Those types of things need to be practiced outside and then integrated. And then the next step is you have to evaluate how effective those things were. So you monitor and review any kind of gaps in the skills with the intent of improving, honing, and filling those gaps where you were like, when I was out there on the mat, this guy's grips were so strong. I don't feel like I could have broken his grip. And I've certainly felt that a million times. But I know that when I start to feel or think that thought, I don't know if I can break his grips, I start to lose, right? I immediately have chosen, I'm not going to win this match. I'm not going to be able to break his grips. And there's so many things I get stuck on. I have to break his grips, right? But there's so many alternatives, right? That you can do in a match besides breaking a grip, right? You can move left or right. You can move forward or back. There's so many things that can happen with your position and your stance and in your attacks. But oftentimes I could get stuck in those. I've seen athletes get stuck with this kind of self-talk. So you have to evaluate that, identify it, and then learn. And then the cycle starts over. So then you learn new skills based on the data you gathered during your competition and what you evaluated. Then you practice those skills outside of the dojo. You bring them into the dojo, you bring them into competition, and then you evaluate how you did. So we kind of have this progression where you build stronger and stronger skills through this cycle over time. And so I think that's a huge thing that is kind of overlooked in some of this stuff that you'll find just kind of around about sports psychology. Yeah. So I don't know if that resonates with you or if you've had any experiences.
Yeah, well, something I wanted to mention is because you said there about the negative self-talk.
Yes.
So the issue I had was I was too positive in my self-talk.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then, so I was building myself up and I was like, and I'd spend, the whole morning before the competition, I'm like in my head thinking, like, come on, you've got this. This is your day. You're strong. You're this, you're that. And I went onto that mat and I was just too psyched up. I'd get a grip, and then the person would be strong, and then I was like, in my head would be like, well, this isn't going as planned, is it? Because in my head, I was just going to grab hold of this person and like pretty much launch them through the wall. Like, that's how, how my head had sort of like the point I'd got to. I was like the Hulk type of thing, right? And obviously it just was so far from reality, right? Not to say that I didn't have the abilities to win, but like the point my head was at was way, way, way out there. And then the crash of my ego at that point was huge, and I just panicked in the fight because I was just like this isn't going to plan, right?
Yep.
And so and then I realized that after a while I was like, hang on, like I'm just getting myself way too psyched up here. And then I'd seen the inverted U arousal curve in terms of that point. I was like, okay,
your Dodson curve. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd seen that as a visual. And I was like, right, okay, right, this makes sense now. Like I'm just getting myself too G'd up before the competition, and
that's right.
And I just went and experimented, and I changed my whole pre-fight ritual in competition day. Everything has changed, the whole thing, and I've had I've had more success in the sense that I enjoyed competitions far more. So I went from like not enjoying competitions really because I was putting too much pressure on myself to being in a way where I was actually, even if I was always fighting well, even if I lost, and I was enjoying myself because I'd taken that pressure off.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's just such a weird, I was like, what's the point of doing this if I'm not going to enjoy myself? That's the whole reason is to come here and have a good time, right? What's the point? Like you win and you feel like crap, even though you've won because you've put so much pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
It just seemed, I was like, this is ridiculous.
There was definitely times where I've thought before matches, like, why do I do this? Like, why am I signing up for this? This isn't even, and it's like at that point when you're like, I'm not even having fun. It's like, you really have to look back and evaluate what the purpose of this whole point is. The thing I really like that you identified though is that it wasn't necessarily a problem with your self-talk, right? Your self-talk was probably too elevated, too grandiose, but the real issue was that Yerkes-Dodson curve, and that you were putting a scale of 1 to 10 on your performance, or on your energy level, where 1 is you're asleep at home in bed, and 10 is like you're having a panic attack, or you're so fired up and ready to kick someone's ass that like you're through the roof, which it sounds like you were pretty close to that, but you were using self-talk to pump yourself up. But it's really hard for your mind to concentrate and focus when you're at that level of an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10. So using techniques like relaxation, mindfulness, deep breathing, to bring yourself down into that zone of where you're optimal is key. And I think that, there's an assessment process for being able to find out what your number is. I call it your number. So, if 1 is you're sleeping and 10 is, you're through the roof, we want to get you somewhere in between, maybe a 5 or a 6, right? Into that zone where you're green, rather than red or yellow, where you're just completely asleep. So there's an assessment process for doing that. When you go back and you reflect on, some of your best competitions, where were you? How did you feel? Were your muscles tense versus relaxed versus very stiff? Was your heart rate slow versus fast? Rate all of these things on a scale of 1 to 10. Was your breathing slow or fast? And your best competitions, you'll find you're probably in that middle zone of, a 4, 5, 6, or 7. And you're not through the roof, because you're able to actually to focus on the task at hand. And you'll also, you use more of your intuition in your judo, and you're going to be much more fluid. And when there is a problem, you'll be able to tackle that with a more mindful kind of approach, if you want to think about it in those terms. So if you think about your best competitions and your best randorias, or whatever it is, think about those things, your muscle tension, your heart rate, your breathing, your doubts and worries and fears. Was there a lot of them or a little of them? And then where did they fall on a scale of, nearly 0 to a whole bunch on a scale of 10? And I bet most of your competitions will fall somewhere in the middle. And then you use some skills to attack those various areas, right? Use relaxation to deal with your muscle tension and your heart rate and your breathing, or you use breathing techniques to deal with your breath and feeling out of breath, or not having enough breath. Your doubts and worries, you can deal with that after the fact using some positive self-talk. So those are some ways to kind of assess and find out, where should I be on that curve, that performance curve, that Yerkes-Dodson curve. So you're not spazzing out or completely over focused on and anxious. But then those are also skills that you need to kind of develop and evaluate after the competition, so that you can kind of continually reinforce and use those mental skills. But that's a good starting point, is to start with that Yerkes-Dodson curve and find out where you really are. And if you've never done a competition before, go out there and just see what it's like, maybe for a new student, or see how you feel during randori, or just when you're sparring, or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah. So the other thing that I used to throw into the mix when I was a younger athlete was heavy metal music.
Yeah.
So big heavy metal fan. So I had like extremely elevated positive self-talk and heavy metal music, like fuel on the fire. So that was something. So that was something I didn't remove, but I was listening to that music all day, right from the moment I woke up, and I was just too keen. And then, so in terms of my own routine, I would listen to a bit of music, like just as I was starting to warm up, like as I was getting changed, as I was running around the mat, and then I'd take that out and I wouldn't listen to any more music really throughout the rest of the day. And then my experience with mindfulness and practicing mindfulness, it took a while. It took a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
And, like I say, just becoming present, becoming aware of how I felt. And then on the day of a competition, or well, anytime actually now when I feel myself starting to get nervous and I become aware of that and I can feel it just elevating, your heart rate just starts to elevate and you can just feel your palms getting a little bit clammy.
Yeah.
And once I want to become aware of that, then I have a few breathing techniques I use for myself. And, especially on a day of competition, I found that those really helped. Just bring me back down a little bit.
Yes.
Because I think that's it. You're just walking that fine line as the competition, right? So you don't want to be too relaxed, right? So you need to be able to like get yourself pumped up, but then you also don't want to be too energetic. So I sort of created a bit of a trigger for myself. So as soon as I stepped on the mat, I would have like up until that point, it didn't matter what, like I'd joke with people, I'd have a laugh with my coach. It just didn't matter what was going on. But then as soon as my feet touched the mat, when the referee was like, right, on you go, I'd have my trigger then because I was then going on the mat. So that's when I needed that switch. And then I didn't feel as though I wasted any energy being nervous because that's something else I don't think people definitely underestimate is how tiring nervous energy is.
Yes. The thing that switched for me realizing about nervous energy is that I oftentimes what happens is you have a relationship with that anxiety and people want to push that fear away. So they do all of these things, all of these tactics. They ignore fear or they ignore an emotion. And all emotions are it's information that tells you something is going on in your environment. And if you look at that information just for what it is and you recognize it and you say, okay, this is just a piece of information that I need to pay attention to. So like, let's say anger, if you're feeling angry, anger tells you when your boundaries have been crossed or your values have been stepped on. Now, when you recognize that and you express that anger, the anger subsides. So nervousness is telling you, listen, there's something, there's a threat in the environment and you need to pay attention. So, and of course we're going into fight, right? Judo players are walking into a fight. So of course you're going to be nervous, but it's your body's way of telling you and helping you prepare for a fight that it needs to be in. And when I realized that, oh, this is my body helping me prepare for this battle I'm going to go into, for this fight I'm going to go into, that turned around how I thought about anxiety and the nervousness I felt before competition. I've done a lot of other techniques to kind of help that, including visualization and mental imagery, which were very, very helpful for me in preparing for my competitions. I could speak a little bit about that too.
Yeah, please do, because I've had a positive experience with that as well, so probably would help others as well.
Yeah, visualization. I love how you're talking about that pre-competition preparation, because I feel like that is a huge muscle that goes unworked for a lot of judo players and probably in the BJJ community as well, for a lot of martial artists in general. But when I create a visualization, or first of all, what is visualization? So kind of optimal performance really requires practice, as we've kind of been talking about. So like, how do I practice without a mat or a training partner? Well, you can use kind of use your visual imagination. You can use mental imagery to begin to create a pathway to like achieve success without having to actually step on the mat. So you can practice in various ways without actually needing to be in the dojo. So what is it? Mental imagery is using your imagination to recreate or kind of practice your performance. And there's two types. There's recall and then rehearsal, right? So first, I want to kind of talk about recall. Recall is using your imagination to remember one of your top performances and visualize your best competition performance in as much detail as possible. And you use that kind of mental recall to kind of access and put yourself into the same mindset as your past performances. So these can kind of help you and give you details about kind of your experience and help you understand, what is it that I did really well and what can I do again, and help you kind of get into that zone, which I think is really, really like important in a kind of a pre-competition preparation. And then there's rehearsal, right? Which to me, I feel like for me has been more helpful than just like a kind of a recall. So there's two types of mental rehearsal and broken into two categories. There's technical kind of rehearsal, and then there's competition strategy rehearsal, in my opinion. So you can kind of create a visualization for how to do the perfect kind of Taiotoshi, right? And that will help you hone that skill. And you might, in your Taiotoshi, think about where you put your hands and your feet and all the technical aspects that'll help with your technical game. Yeah. I think what we're talking about more is the kind of competition strategy. It lets you practice those things in preparation for a big competition. And I use that kind of competition strategy. I start to use that weeks out, about 2 weeks out before a competition. And if it's a big competition, the science would say even begin to do that even further out. But I've kind of liked this, the 2 weeks thing, because it gives me personally, I feel like it really crams everything in there. And I like that kind of, I feel like I'm prepping for a shorter amount of time. And that feels good to me. So my visualization starts very early. It actually starts like preparing for the event, where I reflect on like going to the event, like getting my bag ready, making sure my gis are in there. And so I write all of this stuff out, and I write out my process. So it becomes on when I'm actually preparing, I'm actually at the competition. It all feels like I've done it before over and over again. And it all feels very familiar. So what kind of makes up a competition strategy visualization? I think there's parts you have to talk about and write about: your preparation, your competition day. What does the arrival and weigh-ins look like? What does warming up look like? What is that period of waiting when everyone's like, okay, we're gonna be competing now, and you feel like it's getting closer, but there's still just that long, arduous wait. You're not really sure when you're going to go up, because it's always can be kind of up in the air, and then you're in the hole, right? And then the actual fight. So I'm writing all of this stuff down, like imagining my feet stepping on the mat, imagining seeing the referee, seeing my competitor, feeling perfectly prepared, repeating affirmations throughout this process, and seeing myself where I want to be, because I love it, and I'm really happy to be here. Imagining that kind of perfect throw, the pre-competition kind of approach. Am I going to approach his right hand or his left hand? Is he a left-handed fighter? Is he a right-handed fighter? Where am I going to put my grips? Those types of things. And then feeling the win and the satisfaction from that. And then, even after the match, imagining my teammates, patting me on the back. We're getting a picture. We're having fun. We're going to get a drink afterwards. All that type of stuff really helps me prepare even weeks out from the event. And I go through this in a lot of detail, and I do this with my other teammates as well. We create these weeks out of before competition, so that it all feels very familiar. Oftentimes I'll try to get pictures of the arena if I can, or get pictures of the hotel, so I can kind of begin to really put myself there. And if you do a very good visualization, it should awaken a lot of your senses. Like I can almost feel the tatami under my feet, or I can hear that kind of the slap of the mat from other people getting thrown, or the crowd. So when I'm really doing a good visualization, I feel all those things, and I can hold them all firmly in my mind, so that when I'm there, I'm not feeling the same anxiety. It all feels very familiar, and like I've done this before.
And with that, would you set the time aside? So would you, like any other training session, would you be like, right, on a Wednesday afternoon between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, I am going to sit down and visualize?
It needs to be formalized. And I would recommend not doing it at night, because when I've done them at night, and I hear this a lot from my teammates and other people that say, like, I get too pumped up. Like I'll go do a workout, or I'll come back from and I want to do my visualization. And it's like, I get too anxious, or I get too adrenaline rush, because if you're doing it well, you're going to feel that. So I oftentimes visualize in the morning or on the plane to the event, or things like that. So you have to find a time and really make it standardized, just like you would with a mindfulness practice, right? So that you're kind of grounded in that. But in the morning time, in the afternoon, set a time, block out time on your calendar, whatever you need to do to be able to practice it. So it's thoroughly, and doing it a couple of times a week leading up to the competition is going to be very, very good. Very, very good. And I recommend it, actually.
I'd like to talk to you now about post-competition.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of focus, and obviously this is so far the focus of our conversation, I think this is where most attention is placed, when it is placed, is on the lead into a competition, the day of the competition, getting that result.
Right.
The reason why I'm asking you this is because when I've look back on my judo career, some of the lowest moments I've had, right, has been the day after a win. And I've returned back to my normal life. I've gone back to, I might be at work, or I'm just back on the mat. And, the day before I won this competition, and like you say, there's been this week, the lead up physically and mentally preparing for weeks for this competition. And then just say I did win, or I got a good result. And then, the next day, it's just returning back to that normal routine. And, that there's that very, very stark contrast in feeling and emotions between winning or like performing well at a competition and realizing that particular goal, right, and then back to the grind the next day. And that was something I've had to learn, realize and learn, and I have my own ways of develop my own ways of dealing with that. What do you have any thoughts around that? I mean, and then also processing as well, like processing losing. But to be honest with you, like dealing with a loss was far easier actually than dealing with a win sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes this area is not overly discussed either.
That's true. I do have some thoughts on that. And my initial thought isn't actually my own. It comes from Jigoro Kano. And he said, paradoxically, the man who has failed and the one who is at the peak of success are in exactly the same position. Each must decide what he will do next and choose the course that will lead him to the future. And that to me sits so, it's a beautiful quote, and it sits so perfectly, because you really have the opportunity to choose, am I going to continue to improve, right? Or am I going to continue to do judo in the same way that I'm going to do? Just like any other type of any other kind of training, everyone has kind of ups and downs and wins and losses, and you're turning a new, difficult, very, very difficult skill set into a habit. And to make good habits, the ones that kind of increase your performance stick, you really have to evaluate how you performed and identify where you can improve. And I think dealing with the wins can be really, really tough, because it's like how much, there's that fear, the fear of failure people talk about a lot, but the fear of winning, right? And then being able to actually improve upon that win can even seem more daunting to some people. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's like, what do I do with this win now that I because my pathway isn't as clear. Does that seem to kind of summarize what you're saying?
Yeah. And there's potentially an element of is it imposter syndrome?
Yeah. Yes.
Sometimes creeps in where you're just like, did I deserve to win that competition?
Right. Was it all luck? Right. Was luck just on my side? These are all doubts that I think a lot of athletes share, and a lot of judo players share, because it's like, I don't ever see myself in one of those reels, in the highlight reel or whatever it is. I've never seen myself as being one of those types of people. Do I really deserve this kind of this kind of win. And the way I won it, was it as good as I could have won it? I don't know. If the guy had really good technique, maybe he was having an off day. So all of that stuff, all that kind of thinking points me to self-talk, right? And makes me think about, there's all this preparation about self-talk in the beginning, but one of the big things I advocate for is, looking at self-talk after an event actually happens, because that's where you're going to have a lot of those doubts and worries and fears pop up, right? Because I think the anxiety coming into a competition can be easily worked through with mindfulness or kind of mental imagery or deep breathing, but it's the stuff afterwards that I think you're right doesn't get talked about. And I often see some of those doubts and worries come through with athletes after the fact. So really evaluating some of those statements that you're making to yourself, logging them down, and then finding if they're truly, are these truly based in reality, or are these something that I'm just telling myself because, you did win, you did compete at a high level, and really trying to face those head on and really. And I think that a lot of athletes don't talk about them to their coaches enough, or their teammates enough. They leave that self-talk to themselves, and they don't share it, which I think is a real tragedy, because bringing some of those things up and getting that social support from your team or your coach can be really good for getting some of that negative self-talk out of your mind.
Yeah, I was very fortunate in that with the people I had around me when I was training in the UK. We'd all been a sort of team. So there's a group of us, Michael Hawley and Danny Harper, who I've both had on the podcast before.
Yeah.
And we'd known each other since we were 12, 13, and we'd compete against each other. And then we'd go overseas together for years and train together. So then when we started training full time in our when we were 20, just finishing university, we'd known each other for 7 or 8 years by that point. So there wasn't much we didn't know about each other.
Yeah.
And, we're very fortunate that we were able to sort of be there and were able to talk to each other. And it definitely helped in the process. And it makes such a huge difference. They say that support around you, people, like you say, your coach, you can talk to about these things.
I think the other thing is that there's this thought that you have to do more after you win. You have to keep going, and you have to keep pushing forward, and you have to go to the next big tournament, or you have to go to, and I think that part is can feel like such a grind. So if you're really not communicating with your coach about what's appropriate to you, you can burn yourself out so quickly. And we see that with athletes. And I mean, there's this idea of a winning streak, right? And I don't know. I wish I knew more about this in the psychological literature about winning streaks. And I wish there was more research about that, but I don't know how much of a reality that is, that feeling that you have to do something more, you have to go to the next big competition, I think needs to take as much evaluating as a negative kind of thought does, to really see and check in with yourself about what you want to do, and what is the most strategic thing to do and the most thoughtful thing to do for your future, right, in judo.
Yeah, I think with the winning streak side of things, I suppose there's an element of building momentum. So I have this conversation with people, because when they start out doing competitions, they don't realize, I don't think, that to get better at competitions, you have to do more competitions. They think then they have to do more training. And it's like, well, no, training will get you so far. But then when you start doing competitions, then you realize, okay, so you get better at like all the things we've discussed so far today. You start getting better at implementing them. You get better at the competition day. And there is an element of momentum from that. And then that can lead into a winning streak where, you hit that point. And I suppose it would be understanding when to not quit as in totally quit, but when to go, right, okay, cool. We've got to this point. Now we need to take a break. Now we need to regroup and focus on this other stuff again. And then look at these other competitions rather than just being like, right, next.
Right.
So the thing that actually got you to the good point will become your undoing at a certain point.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that's a beautiful point.
So I'm very conscious of the time.
Yeah.
I know you said you only had about an hour, which we've just hit now, but I really want to talk to you about your book and then the
Okay.
current research you're doing as well. Do we have time to squeeze that in?
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, I've got a little bit of time built in here before I've got to go lift some weights with some buddies.
Yeah, awesome. So
Cool.
you've got a book on your website, which is headgames.shop.
That's right.
Do you want to just talk us through the book and maybe like where this sort of the idea of that came from and what the say the practical usage of the book would be?
Absolutely. So yeah, the mental game is 5 chapters of the most basic and essential, I would say the most fundamental mental conditioning exercises that'll help someone improve their game. All right. It walks you through the process of setting goals, which is kind of foundation for any kind of competitor or a serious player that just wants to get better. It doesn't mean you have to be a world champion or even win at a local tournament. You could be just trying to perfect your technique or something along those lines. So I'll walk you through kind of the first piece is about setting those goals. The next chapter is about managing energy, and especially kind of competitive energy that we talked about quite a lot today with the Yerkes-Dodson curve. It teaches you relaxation techniques and techniques to help you kind of get pumped up if you find yourself, too calm in those situations, so that you're really in that kind of perfect zone where you feel prepared and not overly anxious. And then I also talk quite a bit in the book about self-talk, which that's a really important key. I'm glad we talked about that today, because that self-talk after the competition can really be something that can grind at someone and give them a lot of anxiety about the next steps of where they're going in their kind of performance. And then creating visualizations as well. So that kind of requires practice. You'll be able to learn the basics of mental imagery, use a kind of mental recall to put yourself in the mindset, and to develop a mental imagery script to prepare for competition. And then there's a whole chapter on reviewing each one of those pieces and studying how you can improve on each one of those pieces. So it's this whole kind of wraparound where you learn the skill, you integrate it you learn the skill, you integrate it into competition, you evaluate it, and then you learn new skills. So you follow that full circle, and the book can be reused over and over again with lots of space for you to kind of write and think about and reflect on your experience as a martial artist and focus on those pieces. So that's what the book's about. And I think it can be beneficial for lots of folks to focus on those if they really want to gain some of those fundamental pieces of mental conditioning. I think in the next few months, my hope is or my goal, I shouldn't say my hope, my goal is to put a lot of this stuff online. So I'll have an online learning platform. So with videos and interactive things that, you could receive coaching from me or develop your own kind of self-talk goals through kind of a more interactive website rather than just like a book that you can kind of reflect on. And so that learning platform, I'll talk about kind of competition stuff. I'll have something about, what do you do with failure and winning? How do you overcome losses and injuries? The kind of the mental preparation that's needed there, because it's a kind of a different approach. And then I'll actually have a whole course on mindfulness as well, which is great that you're already interested in that and doing some of that stuff. So all of those kind of 3 topics will be online learning platform that people could join. So those are the next few things I have kind of rolling around in my head and have goals to set over the next, I would say, 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds really good. And that's, so just repeat the website so people can find you. It's headgames.shop. The other thing I noticed on your website was your research.
Oh yeah.
So have you got current research going on, and you wanted to talk about that quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm interested in self-efficacy and how self-efficacy is someone's kind of ability to size up a challenge and then overcome it. And I'm specifically interested in people's level of self-efficacy and their competition record, and to see if their self-efficacy can predict certain outcomes within themselves, right? Within their kind of competition experience. So there's a couple of surveys on there that I would appreciate anyone checking out. And then you also get, if you finish the survey, you get 20% off the book. So definitely do that. The survey only takes about 15 minutes to complete, and it's definitely a good. It will definitely help out their research, which then I will publish on the website and use for kind of more research. We'll kind of continue to grow from that as we begin to understand self-efficacy and how it is a predictor in certain outcomes within your kind of, your judo game or your BJJ game as well. So check that out, please. I would really appreciate that. Thank you for mentioning that.
No, fantastic. Yeah, no, good. So I'm gonna fill it in afterwards. I just noticed it the other day. And in terms of your book, that's only currently available in the US. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct for now. But this week, I know we talked about this, I think a little bit last week. This week, it should be available in Canada, Australia, and the UK. That's where I'm hoping to go. And then Mexico would be the next spot. So hopefully
Awesome.
week, I'm going to work those pieces out.
Great. So, well, this will probably go out in about 2 weeks. So hopefully by the time it actually goes live, then that'll all be done. And then, so people around the world will be able to check it out. Yeah, it's interesting. As I say, I've studied this myself, just my own personal.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of books and experimented with a lot of different techniques. So it's great that there's someone out there, because I've not come across anything else specifically focused on like judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu in this space.
Yeah.
So it's great to see that there's something going on there, because not everyone has the time to read through tons of books. And as the joys of traveling the world is either sit and watch films or TV series on the plane or whatever. And
right.
I started to gravitate towards reading and doing my own research, and I just found this area really interesting. Which is funny, because when I was at school at 16, I started taking psychology, and after 2 weeks, I dropped it because I thought it was a lot of crap. Right? And then
absolutely.
Fast forward a few years, and I'm like, maybe I was wrong on that one.
That's great.
Yeah. No, fantastic. I really enjoyed that. It was great talking with you. I really appreciate you taking time to come on and share your ideas. This is the topic, like I said at the beginning, the topic I've wanted to discuss for a while on the podcast. So, it's nice to finally get that done.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do it again if you ever do that. But thank you so much for this opportunity. I'd love
to do it. Once I get your book, and I'll go through it myself, and then I'd love to get you on and we can talk about it some more. And or maybe when do you, with your research, when are you looking to? What's the time frame on that?
So that's a really good question. I need to get a good sample size, and I don't have a good enough sample size, but I would like to release something in about 6 months. Which would be around, I think I can get a good enough sample size in about 6 months, with the rate that it's people are kind of gravitating towards it now. So being able to publish something like that, and then have those kind of more online kind of interactive experiences with videos and things like that, explaining the concepts and making it very, very clear and accessible for people. Because, it's funny. I feel like, you're talking about, wanting to read more and focus on reading, but I feel like other people are kind of wanting to focus more on videos, and they enjoy to consume the content that way. Either way, it's fine. I can adjust to whatever, but that's kind of my main reason for doing it that way.
Yeah, the reading for me just sort of tied in nicely with mindfulness, and just being present and focusing, and also just the mental side of being able to just sit there and read. And like when I first started, I was never a big reader as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really, just couldn't sit down, couldn't concentrate. Classic. I was diagnosed with ADD as a kid, and I was just like all over the place. And then once I, started reading, I just find myself falling asleep after like a page or two, and then I got into it, and I started more and more, and it's just sort of snowballed from there. And I'm reading now just find so much enjoyment in it. Like I'm reading War and Peace at the minute, which would have been something that would have given me anxiety. Like it's ridiculous that a book would like give you anxiety. Or I'm not even going to bother reading that. Actually, funny enough, the bit I'm up to now it's just a quick side note.
Yeah.
So Napoleon has just entered Moscow in the book, and now bear in mind this book's obviously fiction based on fact to a certain degree. And the chapter I just read was Napoleon having self-doubt about the fact that he'd reached Moscow. He's like, surely I'm not in Moscow. And he kept having these little moments where even though he's walking through the streets of Moscow, he can't actually believe he's reached there. Moscow.
Wow.
I thought it was quite funny that, obviously his book was from the 1800s and they're discussing, Napoleon's self-doubt.
Yeah. No, that's huge. That's funny.
Okay. So you've got weights to get to and I've got a judo class to head off to. So
same here. Yep.
Again, thank you so much for coming on. And maybe we'll pencil in another conversation for 6 months' time once you've got that research and you've got some more of your goals into action. And it'd be good to touch base again and see where we're up to.
That'd be wonderful, David. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's been great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.